Hi there, everybody. I know. Look, I know I'm early, but I have an important thing that I have to get to. It was either no show or this, and so I'm doing this. I don't expect to have any live viewership on this program, but if you happen to stop by, you will find the link to the studio in the show description on YouTube, and feel free to jump in if you so desire. I wanted to do a program because things are happening with the Cleveland Browns that need to be reported, at least in an unbiased and uncolored way. And that's my job. Not that I get paid for it, but that's my job. The big news coming out of Cleveland is that the New York Jets requested an interview with Bill Callahan and were for an offensive coordinator's position. And basically, Callahan said, no. The big topaz, no. The uncertainty of quarterbacks there, and at his age, why? Callahan is not only staying with the Browns, the Browns have given him an extension. And this is good news because, first of all, we're going to have a different offense in place. And second of all, with a new defensive coordinator, who we'll talk about in just a moment, it'll be nice that the offensive linemen will have continuity as far as what they're doing and what they're supposed to be doing. And who knows, when we might be stronger next year with having both Pokich and Nick Harris at the center position. We'll see what comes down. But I was glad to see Callahan has been a bright, shining light in Cleveland, as he has been in other places around the league. And he's a guy that you want to have on your side. And I know what you're saying. It's like, well, the run is going to be de-emphasized, and the reason it's going to be de-emphasized is because we're going to be throwing the ball all the time. And I have no freaking idea. I can't see Kevin Stefanski just going wild and throwing the ball down the field. What I would like to think is that with a solid offensive line, there can be better protection and better balance so that when we run the ball, but that there will be time for Deshaun Watson and give him a chance to make plays, not only with his legs, because I'm not really sold on running quarterbacks. What I am sold on is the ability to teach wide receivers to get open after the play breaks down and communicate with a quarterback who has the ability to see the entire field. And I think that could become an important way of getting chunk plays that the Browns have just been unable to do for whatever reason. And I think part of it is that the wide receivers do not have the best speed in the world. So good news in that respect. I'm very happy that Callahan is going to be returning to the Browns with an extension. We definitely need that. We need our running game, and we need to keep people happy. And I don't mean Myles Garrett. I mean Nick Chubb. Got to do it. All right. Next, you got to love Jim Schwartz. Is he the right guy for this job? You just don't know how, what they're going to do to him. I mean, ownership has its ways. And Schwartz basically said all the right things at his introductory press conference about how Jimmy Haslam is willing to open up the pocketbook to criminals. No, how he's willing to open the pocketbook up to bring talent to Cleveland. He's not afraid to spend on things, and that's what you're looking for, because you can't just go discount cheap on things. And the fact that there is already talent on the defensive side of the field, although it just wasn't working very hard for us, Jim Schwartz is the kind of guy who's a no bullshit guy. And I think Cleveland fan base should be happy with this guy. And I think he's a little older now at 56. He used to be an excitable boy. kind of like Greg Williams, Jim. Jim Giles is in the chat room. Uh, uh, yeah, but a tough guy. And he's getting into a situation where he's surrounded by Ivy League people, but he's reminding everybody who he is. Quote, I got a PhD in footballology from the Browns and Bill Belichick. That, this is a plain spoken guy. And he's going to tell you like it is, whether you like it or you don't. And there's not going to be any of this bullshit that we've been hearing from our defensive coordinator for the past couple of years. And this guy is accountable. And he is a guy who works wonders with pass rush. And he's had some really good defensive ends over his tenures as defensive coordinators for different teams. The one name that stood out was Albert Hainsworth, who, referred to him as a mastermind. I don't know if that might be going a bit far, but the fact is, the wide front that he's advocating and has advocated for his career isolates defensive ends, which is interesting because idiot Clowney walked away from what could have been a real payday for him. Now, I don't mean from Cleveland. He says 1 year in Jim Schwartz's system, isolated, it would have answered the complaints that the little bitch had. And it would have probably, not that the Browns necessarily would have kept Jadeveon Clowney, but it would have answered the complaints because the wide front that they are looking at isolates people. It makes it harder to chip block. And it is something that emphasizes pass rush. And it's something that what we're seeing, what we always find when we play teams like the Ravens, and they find ways to get their linebackers into the pass rush. They find, and they always have good defensive ends. And there's always people like JJ Watt in our face. There's always people who, are defensive ends, but there's also, it opens up all kinds of confusion and mismatches if you have, people like, and I'm going to use a poor man's example, a guy like Chase Winovich, who might be a really good, strictly pass rushing guy. A guy like Chase Winovich could possibly become an on-demand third down pass rusher because he's really not a pass defender, and he's never proven to be a full-fledged defensive end against the run. But his early years when he was with New England, he had more sacks. And I think those are the types of players who are going to benefit the most from Jim Schwartz. And, again, Jim, what we don't know is how Taki is going to come off of ACL repair and how long it's going to take him to get to where he's going. But, what it does is it puts a weak spot for the Browns, which is the linebacking core, in a situation. And again, this has not been our strong suit over the course of time. Be that as it may, Schwartz is a person who has been around the league. He's been a head coach. He had 1 good year as a head coach in Detroit, which is one more than a lot of people have had. Ask Marty Morningweg. And, 29-51 as a head coach. He's clearly a defensive coordinator. I think at this point in his life, he understands that. People are going to be going to young guys out of college, the college ranks, and they're going to be getting big-time offensive coordinator-oriented coaches to become head coaches in the NFL. They start them out as offensive coordinators, and they move them right up. A guy who's a defensive coordinator will be a defensive coordinator, but it's going to be hard. He falls right into the category of the Lovie Smiths and the people who were really good defensive coordinators, but really couldn't make the transition to being head coaches. So, I think that's, pretty much the story there. And it'll be interesting. You know, and Jim is bringing up a good point. You play that wide with the front, you need linebackers that can fill gaps and tackle. And that's right. I mean, what happens to Koromoa? We have, unfortunately, this is a change of direction. And I personally think that it's easier. Koromoa will have a place because he can blitz and he can get into the backfield. But guys who are just part linebacker, part safety, neither fish nor fowl, is going to be a problem. But we don't have linebackers. And well, every linebacker we had got injured, I should say. And Taki was the last one to go down. But before him, God, I'm trying to remember all the people who went down. But F. Phillips went down. Was that his name? And everybody who put the green sticker on their helmet went down. And the guy we got from Indianapolis, Anthony Walker, he was another one. Everybody hurt. So if these people could come back, they'll understand what to do in a scheme like this. But we're going to need better, quicker people. Now, linebackers could be available in the third round of drafts. The problem that we have is, what do you do to get wide receiver? And I don't mean wide receivers. I mean, we need one solid wide receiver to make our wide receiver group, along with our tight ends group, at least passable, in our division. And that's going to be a challenge. People forget that Schwartz was actually with the Browns for a short period of time, but he's been gone for such a long time. Maybe he's forgotten how bad it was the first time around. The real interesting thing about the wide front is there ain't going to be no more bullshit for Myles Garrett. And what we can hope for in a situation like this is that Myles Garrett will finally be held accountable and will be shown off to be a guy who only works 30 to 40% of the time and takes plays off. That ain't going to float with Jim Schwartz. I can tell you that right off the bat. That ain't going to happen. So if Myles Garrett could get 16 sacks, and his goal to get 20 sacks in a season if he stays healthy, could theoretically happen if he worked harder under Jim Schwartz. And Schwartz is not going to coddle and baby him. And if he's unable to do what Albert Hainsworth did, because Hainsworth was the first one to say, while he was referring to Jim Schwartz as a guy who led him to be better than he thought he could be, and was the mastermind, that at the time it was happening, he didn't like it particularly. And that's kind of what's going to happen with Myles Garrett. I think that little silly smile that he walks around with all the time and all the little goofy things that he does are going to disappear, because this is going to become a real fucking job. It's going to become like chopping wood. And that is what we want. We want a tough as nails defense. And if you're not willing to play that kind of football, get off the team. I think we've all been asking for that for a couple of years now. As far as, Kevin Stefanski is concerned, Kevin Stefanski has not had anything to do with the defense, and he left it in the hands of a person who was inexperienced and not capable. And that's exactly right, Jim. Hainsworth was a tackle. He was an interior lineman. And again, when everything's wide, you got to pick your poison. People got to pick up their blocks from the offensive line in front, and it gives you opportunities from different positions. It's why one wide receiver, but the Browns really need to develop one of these guys who's in the defensive line right now, who is a defensive tackle, has to step out in a new system, and then you got to draft a guy who is comfortable playing in that system. And that's how you get the front you're looking for. A little luck, and really a lot of luck. You got to get lucky in the draft, and then you got to get lucky that, that a guy who is the equivalent from the defensive tackle position as a Wyatt Teller is walking from a team that is misusing him into a system that will suddenly use pass rushing talents or whatever from the defensive tackle position. The other thing is penetration and the wide front. The design of the whole thing to get pass pressure on the quarterback and to also be able to generate more penetration into the backfield. We saw ourselves being pushed back 2-3 yards literally every play from the line of scrimmage, and you just can't have that happen. And the other thing to remember is when you have gaps, you got to know what your gap is. And this coach is not going to tolerate people who go rogue on this system. I mean, that's just not going to happen. You do that and you're not going to play. He's going to blow his stack. And, I think that's important as well, that the defensive tackles and linebackers, they all will have the gaps that they have to stay home at and do what they do. And they got to play downhill in order to get this done. We're playing now in a division where Pittsburgh has a young quarterback who, up in the air, whether he's going to succeed or fail, we just don't know. But we do know that that the Ravens are just literally whoring out for Jackson. I don't really, I don't agree with what they're doing, but I'm a Browns fan, so maybe I do agree. They're going to give him say on who the new offensive coordinator is going to be. If you're living in a cave, obviously they got rid of their offensive coordinator in Baltimore. Overrated. I don't hear shit. From that little weasel who used to come here, the Ravens fan, Joe Shipley. I don't hear shit from him. Listen to experience, young'un. When something ain't right, listen to your elders and be polite. Don't talk trash. Be polite. Goodness gracious. But Lamar Jackson is, everyone in the organization's making nice. Oh, we got rid of the problem. The problem was the offensive coordinator. And we recognize that, but it was the offensive coordinator who was lauded just a couple of years ago for developing an offensive scheme that broke this guy's knee. I mean, let's be honest about this. The second I saw what the Ravens were doing, it was not sustainable. At least not sustainable if you want to keep a guy healthy. And yes, it fooled teams because it's kind of like running the option, the old quarterback option plays. And, it's kind of like when you throw a zone at a team in the NBA. Everything is mano a mano. Nobody's used to seeing a zone in the pros. They may not have seen a zone since they came out of college. And so they kind of, for 3 or 4 minutes, you can get some cheap stops that way by confusing the opposition. That's what the Ravens offense basically was. And Lamar Jackson is not a thrower. He's not a guy who, he's not your prototype guy who's going to throw for 300 yards and week after week, game after game. It isn't going to happen that way. So they ran a confusion-based offense. And that offense said, we're going to line up a quarterback who is an additional running back who's better than any running back they have. And then everyone's going to follow the quarterback. That'll leave holes for the running backs. And everyone's got to account for Lamar Jackson at all times. Sounded like a good plan until the knee starts going. And even Harbaugh, the moron, acknowledged that, the days of the running quarterback with the injury that Lamar Jackson sustained this year, which we still don't know the extent of, if he doesn't become a throwing quarterback, there's a problem. There's a real problem. And so, they're looking for a new offensive coordinator now. But again, That was not a sustainable offense any more than Joe Woods was a sustainable defense. The players clearly didn't understand what the point of it was. And I got to say that the people in Denver many years ago didn't understand it either. I don't think there is an explanation for it. It's just strange shit. As far as Schwartz is concerned, you know that he stated openly that the greatest thing that ever happened was the Super Bowl for him. And the only thing that would be greater than the Super Bowl in Philadelphia, and this is he has to say that so Philadelphia fans won't throw a bomb down his chimney, would be if it happened in Cleveland. And let's be honest about it, it's the same thing as the Cavaliers. You could ask LeBron James when he's done and he's hung up his shoes, and winning, in a weird season with the Lakers or winning a bunch of in Miami with a bunch of help, it won't hold a candle to being a guy who actually brought a championship to Cleveland. And I think that's what Schwartz meant by what he said. No denigration on Philadelphia, but it would just be, it would be like you'd have a huge electricity outage in the country where all sports television would go off the air because they didn't want to talk about the Browns actually winning the Super Bowl. That's how big it would be. Back in the Super Bowl year of 2017, the defense that Schwartz ran only gave up 18.4 points a game, 306 yards per game, and 79 rushing yards per game. And Jim, in the short term, it will. But you can't win the way they're going. And you could see what the offense was once Huntley got in there. It's all dink and dunk. But from the very beginning, it's ball gets snapped to Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson takes off, looks around, and then looks at his tight end and throws it to Andrews. That was the offense. And his receivers got worse through the years, and he got worse through the years. But besides the Super Bowl season, Schwartz was a defensive assistant for the Titans when they appeared in the Super Bowl. And he later, 2 years after that, became their defensive coordinator for 8 seasons. The fact that he went 10-6 in 2011 with the Lions as a head coach is just frosting on the cake. It's something that's an accomplishment for him, but that's not what he's looking for. And I know it's not what the Browns are looking for either, is putting Jim Schwartz in charge of the head coach position when you have Deshaun Watson and you're looking for something more explosive. It isn't going to come from a guy with a defensive coordinator's pedigree. The Lions basically improved from the last in the league defensively in his first season to 23rd in their playoff year in 2011 and 15th in his final season in Detroit. So he brought them to the middle of the field. I don't think that this is the guy who is going to there is no real shutdown defense in the NFL today, folks. The passing games, the speed of the receivers, all of it, more points going to be scored. But what you're looking for is week-to-week effort, game-to-game effort, and keeping point totals down. You can give up first downs, but if you're only giving up 3s instead of 7s, and if you're getting turnovers, and if you're making big negative plays by sacking quarterbacks, that will restrict the amount of first downs your opponent gets. It's statistical, yes, but the bottom line is if the quarterback, Deshaun Watson, is what we hope he is, we can put points on the board. We need a defensive squad that continues to pressure people like Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is not completely escapable, and I think that that's important too. So, we know what our job is, and this is why I think he was hired. Albert Hainsworth and Ndamukong Suh, Marcel Darius, and Fletcher Cox. All right. These are interior linemen, defensive tackles who played in this system. And each of them had seasons where they had double-digit sacks. as defensive tackles. So that's pretty impressive stuff. And so he's got that going for him. As for the Browns, I was reading an article, additional on-field seats at First Energy Stadium for next season. And it's like, I don't know. I thought that the fan base was down on Cleveland, but because they received, positive reviews from fans when they decided to actually reintroduce on-field seats during this season, they've decided to bring them back and even add more of them for next year. Of course, season ticket holders get that information first. The seats on the field behind the end zone sold out for 2022. So, another revenue generator, another way Jimmy's going to pay for, I don't mean in a Tim Misney sense. Maybe there is an attorney who will make him pay. But in this instance, this is what is going to be the payback for Haslam. More seats that he can charge more money for. Of course, the Browns are taking deposits on the seats on a first-come, first-served basis, but the prices are yet to be finalized. So everyone's like, yeah, I want one of those seats. Then they'll see the price, and they'll go, yeah. So a Brown spokesperson said the field seats are another way to give fans an opportunity to be closer to the team and interact with players and coaches in a unique way. Fuck you, Stefanski. Fuck you. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. That's the kind of interaction we're talking about. That's why everybody wants those seats. I'd want those seats. That's a lot going on in Cleveland. It's a lot going on in football all at one time. And we prayed for the change in the defensive coordinator's slot, and we got what we wanted. Now, the real question is how I think that Schwartz is going to have a lot of independence in what he's doing because head coach knows nothing about it. You don't understand, Jim. The best way to watch a game is on television. The worst place to watch a game is from a stadium. All right. But look, if you're going to be on the stadium, the one thing that we found out about fans running out onto the field in the middle of games is that they, for some reason, believe that they are part of the game. And it is kind of a confusing thing that people think. And they mistake themselves and insert themselves into these games, and it's not healthy. But if you give people a place to sit on the field, that's something you can tell your friends. I love sitting at home and watching the game. I mean, there's no asshole sitting around me. It's not cold, and I can see most of the replays, or at least the ones that get called. That the Browns end up getting in their favor, which aren't too many. And the other replays I don't get to see because the networks don't show them. But I do get some second looks at plays and get an idea of what calls are bad and which ones were just basically done for gambling reasons. Cavaliers lost a close game. And I'm going through this stuff because I got to get through this show, and I've got to drive my significant other to a social event. And promises are promises, and I always keep my word. Well, usually. Cavaliers lost a game in which you got to say one thing. They came back from 19 down in Memphis. And in the beginning, they were walking in Memphis with their feet. How many feet off of Beal? They weren't playing for shit. They got down. They got off to a good start, but then they just let down. 19 points down, and they came back. And they had two chances to put the game away. And this is And look, we were without Donovan Mitchell. I'm not complaining about the effort of the men on the floor. Isaac Okoro made his 3-point shots. Hallelujah. And Mobley played some great defense. Darius Garland picked up scoring slack. Jared Allen did a good job. The team did really everything it needed to do to win, except inbound the ball with 3.2 seconds left on a shot clock, where Okoro couldn't even get the ball out of his hands, and they are assessed a 5-second violation. And this is like the umpteenth time this year that has happened. And the real stupidity of the situation is JB Bickerstaff's knowledge that the team has trouble inbounding balls, and he left one timeout on the clock. They made the winning basket a putback by Steven Adams with 16.6 seconds left in the game. And instead of, just calling a timeout or inbounding the ball and calling a timeout so that they would get the ball on their end of the floor, they didn't. They just threw the ball in and just went. And there was nothing prepared. And Garland dribbled to the right where literally the sideline and where another man was parked, another Cavalier was parked. And basically they defended themselves out of the final possession of that game. And it was no wonder that the guy was able to block Darius Garland's shot, because he had no room to move, no room to maneuver. Couldn't really do a step back because he was too close to the sideline. And there was somebody who was already occupying the corner. And what it means to me is the thing that's going to hurt the Cleveland Cavaliers as these people mature, these players get more seasoned, is a lack of X and O. They need an assistant coach on that bench to help JB out with the X's and the O's of this game, because there's been too many goddamn examples of not being able to run good set plays at meaningful points in games, or even inbounds passes in the ends of games. Way too many examples of literally turnovers on inbound passes. It's inexcusable, and it's bad coaching. And JB Bickerstaff has done a good job of teaching and motivating. That's great. I think it's, he's done an admirable job. Get him help. Get him help on his bench with an assistant coach who's X and O oriented, because without that, playoff time, you ain't going to win. You got to get to the playoffs, but if you don't want to be one and done, you better be prepared to play in close games, in situations where one possession is everything. So, but it was an interesting game to watch. You can see, and they were healthy. The Grizzlies were healthy. They had everything they needed on the floor. They won 10 games in a row. Now they've won 11 in a row, and they were damn lucky to get out of their building with a win against the Cavaliers. And only for the reasons I just mentioned did they get away out of there. And because Ja Morant was breaking us down, getting to the basket and scoring too many layups, but he does that pretty much against everybody. It is funny. Ja Morant is kind of like a contemporary Derrick Rose pre-injury, guy who really likes to go to the basket and is physical about it. He also is only shooting 30% from three, so very Derrick Rose-esque from behind the arc. If Ja Morant ever developed a three-point shot, God help the world. You'd have the next Damian Lillard plus, but he's still so strong, like Derrick Rose was, that he went to the basket. Derrick Rose, though, wasn't, eventually got leg injuries. The problem when you play in the tall trees in the NBA and you're a guard is that you become like a pinball in a pinball machine. And most players in the NBA go the route of Chris Paul, which is to put on muscle and to develop mid-range game, because taking it into the tall trees, you're just going to get knocked to the ground and it will take its toll. You're going to land on somebody's foot. You're going to twist an ankle, or worse, a knee, worse, an ACL. There's a lot of problems with that. So I think that Ja Morant's a hell of a player, though. And They're a hell of a good shooting team too. Bain can fill it up. And they had another guy, Alzando, or I don't know who the hell he was, but he was scoring off the bench. They had some weapons, and it's no mistake that they're 31-13 and leading the West. There ain't no, they're the real deal. They're big, they're strong, they're quick, they're athletic, and they have 3-point shooters. And they have a point guard who can break you down. It was a great performance by the Cavaliers, shorted because of an inability to finish. And there are going to be people who say it's because they're young. And I say, no, they need better coaching in order to get that done. Cavaliers have to play now against Golden State tonight. And this has got to be one of the most ridiculous things. And this hurts league credibility, to be very honest with you. And I thought they were going to crack down on this shit. If you look at the injury report, and I'm going there now, just so I didn't put it up for the show, I'm a dumbass. And it will be Cavs and Warriors. Bang, bang. All right. This is as of 2 hours ago. This is crazy. After suffering a tough overtime loss to the Boston Celtics on Thursday, they lost an OT. They gave a hell of an effort. The Celtics are at the top of the East for a reason. The Warriors are opting to rest most of their players against the Cavaliers tonight. The team announced that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins will all miss the game. Now, put that together with the absences of Andre Iguodala, James Wiseman, maybe Jonathan Kuminga and JaMychal Green will be back, as I think both of these guys were questionable and now are probable for the game. But the league, and you look at the injuries stated, and I'm not really buying it. Somebody else got disciplined for this earlier in the season, a team. Fans are paying big money to watch people play, and it's like, well, I know it's a back-to-back, and we have to rest our players. It's like, why should fans pay to see a game in which it's a back-to-back where teams are going to do this shit? Now, Donovan Mitchell, I don't think is going to play tonight. I'm not saying that he couldn't, but Ricky Rubio is not going to be playing. Dean Wade is not going to be playing. But the word is that Wade is coming back for Saturday. And this is all part of this back-to-back kind of strategy. I believe that Donovan Mitchell will not play tonight, but he will play Saturday. That is my guess. And believe me, I've been wrong plenty of times. Rubio will probably be back. They're not going to let him take up a roster spot in a situation where he can't play back-to-back coming off ACL. So that's that. The Warriors do have a history of winning shorthanded games this year. But boy, without Curry, Wiggins, and Thompson and Green, it's not a very likely situation. I'm hoping that the Cavaliers will take them seriously. A lot of times guys will see that players are out and not take it seriously. Hopefully the Cavaliers will have learned something from other times having this happen and letting teams stay in games longer than they should. The reason it's important is that we're playing again on Saturday. And if we can get away with playing Darius Garland fewer minutes, if we can get away with playing Evan Mobley and Jared Allen and all of our starters lighter minutes, we'll be able to give a better effort the following night. And we'll be getting Donovan Mitchell back. So, but I don't like this whole notion of teams resting their entire rosters. I think that is pretty ridiculous. I've never understood. And they said they were going to do something about that. And it's always like toe injury, pain inside, all these vague kinds of things. Anybody who's a University of Michigan football fan, you're getting everything that Ohio State fans wished you would get. They're in trouble. Ooh, are they in trouble? They fired their co-offensive coordinator, Matt Weiss, who is under investigation for, quote, a report of computer access crimes. And then you got Harbaugh, saying, no, I'm not going to the NFL. Well, the NFL wouldn't have hired him, the fucking liar. He's insisting that he's innocent of what he's being charged of, and he couldn't have gotten a job. That's why he's going to stay at Michigan, and that's the best thing that can happen for Ohio State fans. It's just what they deserve, I guess. When you hire people that can technically win but are mentally unstable, like Harbaugh is, Jim Harbaugh, you had to figure it was going to come down to this. The guy is self-destructive, and pretty soon Michigan will be right back where they were, and they won't be doing much of anything. As for the Cincinnati Bengals, the big dogs, Joe Mixon, the Bengals will officially be without two more of their top offensive linemen against the Bills. Jonah Williams and Alex Kappa were officially ruled out, leaving Cincinnati with three total reserves on the offensive line. Right tackle La'el Collins has been out with a torn ACL since week 16, and they've got to go in with three reserve offensive linemen against the Buffalo Bills. Good luck. Of course, Zach Taylor said the unit's communication and level of detail was encouraging. It's like, never played before together. Jim Gaffigan, they've never played together before. One person won't know what the other one's doing. Yeah. I thought they did a good job, Zach Taylor said, of the group Synergy. I've never heard of that group before. It must be one of those progressive jazz rock bands. I think they're ready to go and take advantage of their opportunities. Max Sharping and Jackson Carman are the guys who are continuing to work at the positions with Williams and Kappa out. This is going to, but if you're the big dog, there should be no problem for the Bengals, right? We're writing all these excuses for them already. Big dick swinging Joe Burrow's the quarterback, the best quarterback there is. Didn't you know that? You should have read that. Didn't you read that? I read that on Cleveland.com, and I believe everything they say. We'll see. He's going to have to score a hell of a lot of points to win that game, isn't he? I'm going to watch that game and savor it. And then there's the Brooklyn Nets. They're winning and winning and winning and winning. Kevin Durant gets hurt. It's like, don't worry, we got Kyrie Irving. We got Ben Simmons. We've got troubles. Whoa, whoa. Yeah, that's what you got. Ouch. Durant gets hurt. They've lost 4 games in a row. And Ben Simmons capped off the 4th loss by getting himself tossed out of a game. Guy's got mental problems. 6'11", but a mental midget. Who knows what's going on inside that head of his, but it has nothing to do with putting a ball through a hoop or anything else. And it's weird. They're 27-17, which is almost an identical record to where the Cavaliers are. But they were, they started out terrible, and then they started winning everything. And then as soon as Durant went down, which basically he does every year because he's got little skinny pelican legs, that's what happens. But Meanwhile, 11 wins in a row for the Grizzlies. But even they're going to have their share of difficulties in the playoffs. Everybody does. If you don't believe me about the Bengals, ask Eric Weddle. No, don't ask him anything because he's a former Raven, and you know what I think about that. He says the Bengals have zero chance against the Bills. Never say zero. Never say that. Anything, I mean, the Bengals could pick off 2 passes and return them for touchdowns. I mean, Josh Allen has not been walk on water this year. It's all possible. Not likely. That's what Eric Weddle said. So at any rate, that's what I know today. And I wanted to do a program because I think that as upset as I've been about the Browns, the first thing has happened that needed to happen. Got rid of Joe Woods, and we hired a professional defensive coordinator. And I think that's important. The next thing is the players are going to have to get used to having their feelings hurt. That's the next thing. The defensive players who are not working hard, and some of those guys, like the John Johnson III, they're not even going to be back. Might as well not even take the field. If you're going to play for Jim Schwartz, don't even bother with the half-ass effort shit. You're not going to play. You're not even going to be on the team. And they asked Schwartz, and how is your defense going to really, how are you going to figure out who to put on the field? He goes, that's what mini camps, and that's what preseason's for, and what team practice is for. In other words, you better bust your ass in front of me on the field, and I don't care what your name is and what you did last year. If you don't bust your ass, you're not going to play. And that's music to my ears. The next thing that has to change is we got to get a wide receiver, but Kevin Stefanski has to get his head out of his ass, his beard out of his ass, and has to open up a little bit to outside offensive coordination considerations. And I just can't imagine another year of Van Pelt in that situation. I just can't envision another year of him having complete, utter control over the offense. Can't see it. I don't want to think about that. I really think he should have an offensive coordinator, and he should just become a head coach, and he should do what Bill Belichick even did here. And, Bill Belichick was the one who said, I'm not naming anybody a defensive coordinator. And the Patriots are gone. And Bill Belichick is like, I'm naming a defensive coordinator for next season. I mean, you can't be a head coach and be doing things all at once. That's why ventriloquists have one dummy. You couldn't have like 3 of them out there and try to have a 3-way conversation. You can't do that. It's too much on one man's plate, and I don't care what school he went to. I want to see an offensive coordinator come into Cleveland, or at least some kind of an assistant play caller or something who is able to think outside the box from where Stefanski is thinking, because he's not been good enough. And if those things happen, I'll be happy. And we'll find players who are willing to play. It may surprise us who steps up. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this edition of Moohead Radio. I, again, beg your forgiveness for the early start on the show. This will go right up in the archive, so people will be able to watch it as they always do. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again on Monday. Until then, hasta la vista, Pastor Heads. Good night.